Lance, if they gave away an Oscar
Uh-huh.
for the most informed,
Yeah.
best presented
Right.
informer of all things legislative.
Oh, let's because I was going to say I
would
just
like
walk
to
right up there.
thank
I
the
wouldn't
Academy
even need one
for-
of those speeches. I
for
just
Chris
go,
Cargill,
"Oh,
Washington
Chris
Policy Center."
Chris Cargill. I thought you were talking about me. Chris Cargill. Yes, he would. Yes,
He'd
would.
rock the red
He
carpet,
would.
too.
He would, and he wouldn't even have to have his speech written down like I would on like those little notes you pull out. He just figure it out. He's on the phone this morning. Now that we're talking about him this morning, 7:48. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good, good.
We're well, thanks.
If you know Chris Cargill is the Eastern Washington director of the Washington Policy Center in Spokane.
No way. Really?
Yeah, they're also located in the Tri-Cities, in Seattle, and in Olympia. Man, we got think tanks everywhere. Thank you very much. 2021 session over. Now it feels like we should be asking for a damage assessment, Chris. What's going on?
Yeah, it certainly was a rough one, and I think when history looks back on this session, it will be considered probably one of the more divisive, radical, controversial sessions that we've ever seen. And let me give you a few examples of what I'm talking about. This weekend, the legislature gave final approval to a roughly $59 billion budget. That's about a 13% increase over the previous budget, and if you add it to the last three budgets, state spending will have increased almost 50%. There are, of course, valid questions about whether that's sustainable. Legislators also raided and drained, essentially, the state's rainy day fund as a result of this budget. Most legislators voting on the budget yesterday hadn't even read it, and that's because the majority party decided to release the final version on Saturday, all 1,100 pages of it, and there's no way that legislators had the time to read it before voting on Sunday. So there may be quite a few things in this budget that we don't even know about yet, that legislators don't know about yet. One of the things that we do know is that legislators did the work long sought by the state teachers union, and they have refused to extend the window for the state to open public charter schools, and also refused to allocate funding for students in those public charter schools. And unfortunately, this is going to hurt a lot of kids, especially minority kids, throughout the state who attend those charter schools. Legislature also passed this hateful and divisive critical race theory requirement for public schools, colleges, state institutions. If a public employee does not take part in this training, they could be fired. So there are a lot of things to keep your eye on this session that, unfortunately, were not necessarily good.
And who has to take that training?
Any public employee that's at a public school, a college, a state institution, medical school, those type of places.
Jeez. Okay, well, is this the future of the legislature? I mean, have they finally revealed themselves as to what they're going to be in the future?
Well, I would hope not, because if this is the future, I think a lot of people are going to have trouble swallowing that. I mean, we haven't even talked about the tax increases.
Yeah, I mean,
and you better hold on to your wallet, because they approved a boatload of tax increases. Of course, the most controversial is this new state income tax that will start with capital gains income. The most troubling part about this is that legislators decided to throw a clause on the bill that prevents citizens their right to referendum on the issue. And of course, the people have voted against an income tax 10 times. They'd likely do it again, and that's why legislators wanted to prevent them the chance to vote. You can be sure that a lawsuit's going to be filed on this before the ink is even dry, and that's because state law, state Supreme Court precedent, state constitution clearly say that this kind of tax is unconstitutional. Also, the legislature passed a cap-and-trade tax and a low-carbon fuel standard tax that's going to increase the cost of gasoline in our states by about 20 cents a gallon over the next year and a half. And none of that, zero, will go toward fixing roads.
Wow.
Okay. People, I was listening to Fox News earlier, and they're talking about Biden's plan. Right now, capital gains about 20%. He wants to jack it to 43.4%. Wants to, and that would cost, in terms of lost revenue, people taking their companies overseas or or other options, about 124 billion over a 10-year period. So the idea of raising taxes, what do you get when you raise taxes on something? You generally speaking get less of that something because nobody wants to be paying those taxes. So
Right.
all the more reason if you are in Washington and this passes muster with the Supreme Court, you could be really being hit for your capital gains from two sides.
Yeah.
So,
Jeez.
really ridiculous.
And
If the federal capital gains rate goes up, and then of course if this one is implemented, you'd be looking at more than 50%.
Jeez. And I'm not confident that taking it to court's going to do anything, right?
Well, the lower courts will likely rule against it, and the reason for that is because the precedent and the Constitution are so clear. I mean, this isn't even really a question. So you're going to see the lower courts rule against it most likely here in the coming months. The question then, what happens when it's appealed to the state Supreme Court?
Sure.
And what the state Supreme Court justices do? Because of course, as a court, they can overrule previous precedent and say, no, our previous interpretation of the Constitution was wrong.
Yeah.
But there's a real question about whether that's likely to happen either. And the ironic part about all of this, the citizens have said they do not want this. But now that the legislature has passed it and the governor is going to sign it, guess who gets to pay to defend it in court?
Yeah.
The citizens.
Jeez. Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. Oh, man. Okay, Chris. Well, we hope that we have good news in the future about what those courts are going to do, but I'm not very confident.
What does the net
we'll see.
impact of the environmental kinds of things that have been passed? I mean,
Sure.
what do we see happening there in the near and far futures?
Yeah, I mean, the net impact is that these policies are going to increase your yearly costs for a family of four, let's say, who has maybe two small cars. You're going to see an increase of about $350 to $400 a year, depending on where you live. And the reason for that is because sometimes there's colder winters on the east side of the state than there is on the west side of the state. So all of these things will impact you. And unfortunately, they're going to be hidden costs. Again, the legislature is not going to be held responsible for increasing all of these costs because it's not like you're going to see a line item on your bill that says, cap and trade or low carbon fuel standard. It's going to be a cost that comes before that, and that's just going to be passed on to you, and you're not even really going to know it.
Nice. Thank you, Chris, I guess.
Yeah, and the troubling part about these two things, the low carbon fuel standard and the cap and trade, they do not have the environmental impact that legislators say they have. And so we're going to be spending a lot of money on policies that don't make a whole heck of a lot of difference.
So in essence, with all this stuff, we've become more like California now.
It was funny. I was in Texas this weekend, and somebody said to me, the West Coast, California, that's bad. What's Washington like?
Yeah.
And I said the same type of thing. It's almost getting worse than California.
Yeah. Chris Cargill, Washington Policy Center, thank you very much for your time.